welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube. And for this very last video of Metaltober, I decided I would name my top 10 favorite horror films. Now, I thought that this would be pretty interesting. However, when it comes to the list, there will be some movies in here that would surprise a few. Some will almost be predictable, but some would definitely be surprising. But before I definitely get into that, let me definitely name some honorable mentions. And of course, one of the honorable mentions here, and I only got about, I think pretty much only 4 honorable mentions here, so let's definitely not take too much time here. Alright, so the first honorable mention would be both The Fly from 1958, Blu-ray that I have, and the David Cronenberg remake from 1986. Both versions I like, alright? I definitely, and that's why I pretty much named both of them. They were both gonna be in the actual list, but I kind of took it off because of, I remember about another movie that I definitely had to have in there. Still, 2 though, it doesn't matter. Still, I've always liked both these films. The 1958 was definitely the one that I definitely watched the most, but the David Cronenberg one with, fucking what's his name? Gina Davis, of course, and Jeff Goldblum. That's definitely a great one of the top best remakes, and one of those that, when thinking of good remakes, that's definitely one of the ones I definitely would think of. But nothing against the original. Vincent Price being in it, of course, even being in the second one and third one as well. Still, great stuff. Great film. Love both of them. Alright, so the other honorable mention would be Alien from 1979. I don't know if I can say anything because of what has been said already by other people. It's a classic to me. It's definitely a great film. The suspense, the build-up, the whole atmosphere of the film, just fucking great. And of course, Aliens from 1986. And this to me almost wouldn't count at times as a horror film, even though it is a horror film and it's got definitely that horror aspect. But due to having James Cameron on board and directing it, kind of giving it a bit of that action feel, something very similar to like Terminator. And so it has that feel, and just great storyline, of course, the drama, suspense, and of course, but it's just, to me, just a great sci-fi action film. But it definitely also fits horror as well. But it's just a fun movie, and it's just a great film. Alright, so finally getting into the actual list. This wouldn't be surprising to those who know me, but it would be. But it comes in number 10, and that's of course the Scream from 1996. I don't know if I can say anything else about the film other than that I've always enjoyed the film myself. Sure, it may be overrated, many of the other films definitely, but this one, I don't know, I've always been drawn to some of the, of course, over the years, I definitely have come to like also its really violent parts. Just, to me, it is a classic, and for one, I've watched it so many times, so I really couldn't, the nostalgia in me, I couldn't leave it off. So I don't want to try and spend any more time with that. Coming in at number 10 is Halloween from 1978. Again, just like with Scream, I definitely watched this one quite a bit when I was young, actually. And it was just the whole atmosphere of the film as well. And of course, that's always something with most of John Carpenter's work. It's very atmospheric. And the whole storyline always tends to be, even though it's definitely kind of within the horror genre, slasher genre, and definitely one that definitely inspired the movie that did come at number 10, which is Scream. But it's definitely more on a suspense level. than just a pure, straightforward, blood guts type of film. Still, great film. Just really nothing else left to say. Because anything that I'll say would be no different from any of the other reviewers out there who have already reviewed the film. I just put in here, I'm just naming, like, just pretty much just a favorite of mine. Alright. Coming at number 8 is, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, from 1974. For a long time, I was basically banned from ever watching this movie. But when I finally did, I definitely liked it. It's a dark film, like, when I mean dark, mostly by its picture quality. It's not the most brightest film in terms of lighting and such. It's a very dark, gritty film, and I've always liked that. And it's, of course, it's not even all that violent. Sure, there is some parts that do tend to be quite violent, but, and of course, Leatherface with his chainsaw, but at the same time, it's you don't really see him too much cut up a lot. But then again, but the horror comes from more like the psychological point. It's definitely one of my favorites, and definitely a great film. Definitely when it comes to horror as well. I don't want to try and spend any more time. Anyway, so let's definitely move along. Coming in number 7 is, of course, is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And you'd be almost surprised I would have this on here, and even having it just a little bit higher than the 1978 original. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that it isn't a movie that very much because of most of the Halloween movies all are based around Michael Myers and the Strode family. However, this one basically it was a different take, different story. It's whole other film. If it was just called Season of the Witch, probably nobody would have actually gave a shit. They probably would have liked it for what it was. But because of the fact that it was given the Halloween name that was slapped with it, basically for those it completely it took a left turn for those. It was like a complete 180. But still, story-wise, it's definitely great. I just dealing with more like the occult aspect of things, which would definitely come in within the Halloween series anyways. But having, of course, actors such as Tom Atkins and Dan O'Hurley, it's a fucking great film. And Dan O'Hurley, of course, always seems to play a pretty good bad guy. Even his ways that he kind of is in the RoboCop films, especially being the second one, you could definitely tell that he definitely can be a pretty good, somewhat asshole. Great film, and definitely a classic. Atmospheric as well. Of course, here coming at number 6 is another John Carpenter film, and that's, of course, is The Thing from 1982. Just, again, the film is just fucking great. From actors to being Keith David and Kurt Russell, it's a fucking killer film. Definitely one of the more gorier ones from John Carpenter, actually, but it's the whole atmosphere and story and makeup work and all the effects and everything. It's just a really good film, and definitely has you keeps you guessing on who is the Thing, who is, of course, taken over, who is the fucking alien in the film. It's a killer film. That's all I can say. Love it. Coming in number 5 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 from 1986, and this is almost surprising to those that I have this one a bit higher than the original 1974. For one, probably has to do that I watched this movie first than seeing the 1974 one. Nothing against that one. That's why, of course, why I have the original in my list. But this one, this one they definitely decided to up the gore to kind of compete with the other horror films of the 1980s. But with that, this one doesn't shy away from it. This is probably the most violent of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. The rest of the other ones did kind of throw in a bit more, even some of the later ones. But this one I think was the most goriest of them all. From the beginning of the film, where the two fucking rich prick drivers basically pretty much who had played chicken with fucking Leatherface and Chop Top. They, of course, would end up getting revisited at night and fucking, well, they'll get massacred. And of course, one of the driver get his head fucking sawed half fucking off, whatever. It's like, that's something you never really saw a whole lot. Like, they definitely didn't shy away from the violence in the movie. This is probably one of the first movies of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series to actually see Leatherface actually skin his victims. Something that was never seen in the original, and definitely something that wasn't all seen in the later films. This film definitely kind of took you a bit more into the whole what happens within the whole family, how they operate, more so than in the first movie. They definitely did a lot to kind of up, and thanks to the late great Tobe Hooper, he definitely tried his best to definitely make it a bit more different than the other ones. And of course, the directors after him really, I think, didn't know how to actually, I think, handle the series as much right. Even though the other ones were not all that bad, though, save for the Next Generation. But still, it's great. And of course, having Dennis Hopper in the film almost seems very odd. But he fucking plays his character so fucking well. You could tell that the guy actually has fun playing his character, even though for being in films such as Easy Rider, and then also the other films in the 90s like Speed and fucking Breaking Point, I think it was called, with fucking Wesley Snipes. Still, great film. One of my favorites, actually. I think this is a film that at times is very underrated. And of course, Bill Moseley. Do not fucking forget the guy. Never, when talking about this film, never leave him out. And of course, the father as well. It's just it's definitely a classic in my opinion. I love the film. Alright, so coming in number 4 is A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. Now, again, just like with Halloween and Scream, I watched this film a lot growing up. And this was definitely, and of course, it is probably the more darker of the ones, but of course I can't forget to say that the second one was you know, I think both this one and number 2 were definitely one of the darker films of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. This one, of course, again, it will usually be put in almost any other people's favorite horror films, but I had to because I watched it a lot. It's even in ways it's definitely suspenseful. It's definitely got some good build up, but it's just a good film, and of course, again, Robert Englund is pretty menacing in this one and in the second one. I think he's definitely he's at times pretty creepy in the film, both the two, but I didn't put the second one in the list. But still, I should have already mentioned that one, but still, it's a classic. I can't say anymore because whatever I say would be no different than any other reviewer here on YouTube. Alright, so coming at number 3 is actually a really surprising one. That's, of course, I just talked about this film in my rock and metal soundtrack video, and that's, of course, is Demons from 1985. when I first watched this film, and of course I've heard about it for a long time, when I finally watched it back in 2014 on Halloween night, this, I was really drawn in from the atmosphere. Of course, again, it was produced by Dario Argento, and it definitely does have his sort of artsy feel, but this film, I just love how it definitely goes from a horror film to then at times an action film. Again, I say quite a bit in my hard rock and metal horror film soundtrack video. So you can definitely can go back, but where I talk about a certain scene that's so fucking badass in the film. And because of some of that, it's why I put it in here. It's a great film, one of my favorites, and just a classic film. That's all. So, coming in at number 2 is The Evil Dead from 1981. Now, again, this one is pretty... I've always liked... Again, this one I definitely watched quite a bit when I was young. For one, this is definitely the more darker of the Evil Dead films. Definitely, of course, it's definitely one of Sam Raimi's early work, and you can definitely tell that this is definitely a low budget film. But because of it being on a low budget, surprisingly, it really relies quite a bit on a lot more on practical effects. And again, being released in like 1981 or even 1982, depending on the year, because of this movie had a tough time being released and finished. Because it was like recorded in the really late 70s and didn't get finished until the early 80s. And this, of course, is one of the only... Then again, I think that probably the Texas Chainsaw Massacre might have been given an NC-17 rating, but this one was definitely one of the first horror movies I've seen was definitely given a NC-17 rating. Still, it's definitely not the... Again, it's definitely a dark film, but I think I really love the effects. I love some of the makeup work, and I think the best makeup work comes within later, because you can tell that when the earlier parts of the film, that you can tell that some parts were recorded earlier, and were not all that much thought out well. But as again, because of on the budget that they were on, the more the film goes, the more you can tell that they definitely were adding more to the budget, and that definitely came in with the stuff that they had to do on a little later within the years, like 1980, 81. You can definitely tell that they took a long time with finishing the film, and the more time, I think, some of the best parts definitely comes later. It's still a great film, and again, bringing up Sam Raimi, it's his early work, and compared to some of his later films, definitely being like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and Darkman, it's definitely not his best in some ways, but as a horror film in itself and very independent, it's definitely a pretty good one. It's definitely a good film at that. But still, if you want to definitely see as like his more really good, more of like say high quality work, it's definitely this one wouldn't be up there. But again, for what it was and for how it ended up happening and what was done, it's a great film. Of course, again, cannot forget Bruce Campbell. Definitely probably his most best out of his more early work, really early stuff. But again, he definitely does his character, even though it's not like the already progressed Ash character that you would get in Evil Dead 2, where you kind of get classic Bruce Campbell. Still, it at times kind of goes with that. So he's a little more less ballsy, but again, for it being the first film and for what it was and how it starts stuff, it kind of makes sense. So I kind of give that sort of aspect a pass. Still, great film. Alright, so coming in at number one, and this is probably surprising to those that I would have this as my number one, but as a kid, this film actually, and when thinking about when putting this list together, I couldn't believe I was forgetting about this movie. This film, as a kid, scared the shit out of me. And for those who probably know me, of probably would kind of get this. Number one is, of course, is Suspiria from 1977. This, of course, again, one of Dario Argento's more classic films. But this one scared the shit out of me as a kid. And what made it even more scarier was actually from the score, which, of course, was done by Italian progressive rock band Goblin. The addition of Goblin, to me, makes this film creepy. It's like, not a whole lot of music out there scares the crap out of me. Like black metal. That stuff doesn't scare the shit out of me. It always gets passed off, oh, it's fucking dark. Even fucking Marilyn Manson. No, nothing comes close to fucking Goblin with their soundtrack work for Suspiria. Nothing comes close. This band can actually make the most eeriest piece of music that I think black metal artists fucking wish they would do. This is just the whole atmosphere of this film, the whole plot as well. Of course, the plot's pretty definitely dealing with the occult and witches, but this film is fucking creepy. It's like The Evil Dead might have been a creepy film for those, but to me, Suspiria was definitely had much more intense, creepy factors than most of these films in here. To me as a kid, this film actually really scared the shit out of me. And that's why I put this at number one. Because when I think of horror, and when people think of it, it's like movies that really scare you. This is one movie that does. And when it comes to jump scares, of course I forgot about that there is one really good jump scare in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. However, in this film, this also utilizes the jump scare greatly. And there's definitely plenty of scenes in here, especially the beginning part, where the fucking female is looking out the window and those eyes pop up, and then the guy fucking this hairy ass fucking arm breaks through the fucking glass. It fucking scared the shit out of me. And and because of that, this movie is at number one for me. No other horror film has actually scared the shit out of me than this film. And that's what I think is what a horror movie should do. Scare the ever-living shit out of you. And this is the movie that does. Basically almost make it seem like it's a chore to get through. That it's intense. That's what I want to see from a horror film. Is intense build-up, suspense, and just by the whole overall aspect and the scenes, it's gotta have that. And music as well. And that is done in this movie, and that's why I put this at number one. A classic film, and just definitely one of Dario Argento's best, and one of my favorites of his. Of course, again, that Demons was mostly a produced film, but still, that one also had some intense scenes, but this film was the most intense for me. Alright, so hope you enjoyed that, my top 10 favorite horror films. Definitely, it's a very personal list in some ways. And for that, if anyone who is a film lover so ends up watching this film, just remember, it's a personal list. It's not yours. So, you either take it or you fucking leave it. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy Metaltober, and next year I may do something a little different with this month. Anyways, this is Heavy Thrasher Sam. I'm out. And have a happy Halloween. Later.